90s were a time of change for the World Wrestling Federation. WrestleMania in 1990 was headlined by Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. Fast forward to the decade's end and that spot would go to Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Stars like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart had risen and fallen, The Undertaker had completely evolved his character, and the Monday Night Wars had begun and almost ended. However, despite all the change, one thing that was constant from the very first year of the decade was WWE putting out some utterly dreadful wrestling. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE matches of 1990. Join us! Number 10, The Hart Foundation vs. the Bolsheviks at WrestleMania 6. WrestleMania 6 was a grand event headlined by the aforementioned classic between WWE Champion Hulk Hogan and Intercontinental Champion The Ultimate Warrior. As for the rest of the card, it wasn't that great. This was the first Mania to be held outside of the States, emanating from the Sky Dome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. When you think of Canadian wrestling around this time, you naturally think of the Hart Foundation, so it made sense for them to be on the card. What didn't make sense was for them to be in a squash match that ran about the length of a TikTok. Bret and Jim dominated Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov, pinning the latter with a heart attack after just 19 seconds. That makes it the shortest ever WrestleMania tag team match, and the fourth shortest match in the history of the event. Having the Harts win in Canada was a good idea, obviously, but a better idea would have been to have given them a victory in a match that actually meant something. The only reason this isn't any higher on this list is because we've literally run out of things to say about it. Number 9, Jim Duggan and Nikolai Volkov versus the Orient Express at SummerSlam. About 5 months after being squashed by the Hart Foundation in Canada, Nikolai Volkov was on the winning side of a different tag team match, this time in Philadelphia. Now, the singing Russian's partner was Hacksaw Jim Duggan in what I assume was WWE's clumsy attempt at promoting strong US-Soviet relations. Their opponents was Sato and Tanaka of the Orient Express, making this contest a big confusing mess of national stereotypes and jingoistic pride. The actual wrestling wasn't that good either. While the two Japanese wrestlers were usually good in the ring, their opponents weren't exactly the most dynamic of foes. It didn't make for a great stylistic clash. This uninspiring contest only lasted 3.5 minutes before Duggan took down Tanaka with that most devastating of finishing maneuvers, a clothesline. There really wasn't much point to having this bout on the card apart from getting over Duggan and Volkov as a new unit. Wait, what's that? They would never wrestle another televised match as a tag team ever again? Well, isn't that just fantastic? Number 8, The Warlord vs. Tito Santana at SummerSlam. Earlier that same night in Philly, veteran wrestler Tito Santana was charged with getting over a new monster. Unfortunately, that monster moved like he was made out of Lego bricks. The Warlord, who at this point looked like somebody had turned up all the settings on a video game version of Stone Cold Steve Austin, was put over before the match as a powerhouse force to be reckoned with. However, as Roddy Piper said on commentary during this match, just because you're big doesn't mean you can wrestle. Santana carried the contest, executing all the exciting moves and near falls. As for Warlord, his most thrilling maneuver was either the power slam he won the match with, or when he rolled to the outside. Look at him go! This was a big problem with WWE in the pre-Raw days. Matches like this, which should have been done before the pay-per-view to build talent up, had to take up time on the most important shows of the year. Number 7, the Hulkamaniacs vs. the Natural Disasters at Survivor Series. This is the only match from the 1990 Survivor Series you will find on this list. Not because it was an especially good show, mind, but rather an inoffensive one. Well, except for the gobbledygooker. That was pretty damn offensive. This edition of the Thanksgiving show consisted of 5 traditional elimination matches, with the survivors of those going through to the main event to fight again. In kayfabe, that means there could have been 20 people in that match. Almost wish that had happened now, just for the chaos. Jim Duggan, Big Boss Man and Tugboat backed Hulk Hogan against Earthquake's crew of Haku, the Barbarian and Dino Bravo. Whilst this match certainly had star power, once the action got underway it was clearly quite lacking in wrestling acumen. This battle is just thunderingly dull. Barely anyone lifts a finger, the action is ludicrously drawn out, and Duggan gets eliminated for hitting somebody with his 2x4. How'd you not know the rules by now, Jim? In the end, Hogan was the last man standing, shocker, and advanced to the main event. That match wasn't great either, but at least it was better than this. Number 6, Jim Duggan versus Dino Bravo at WrestleMania 6. Jim Duggan keeps popping up on this list, and we're not done with him yet. The plank-wielding, America-loving grappler took on Dino Bravo at WrestleMania 6. Duggan was the patriotic babyface, patriotic about the United States of America at a show in Canada, right? Strange alignments to one side, this match suffered from the very same issue as every other one of Duggan's performances. His moveset was really limited. Hey, I like a clothesline as much as the next person, unless the next person is JBL, but do we really need a match where they make up 80% of the moves? The action was also bogged down by Earthquake, who decided to show up at ringside to interfere on Bravo's behalf. Jimmy Hart was also there, and it was he who ultimately decided the outcome. The Mouth of the South tried to slide Duggan's 2x4 to Dino, only for Hacksaw to intercept it and bash Bravo in the back to get the win. A slightly heelish move from Jim, but I suppose turnabout is fair play and all that. Number 5, Jake Roberts versus Bad News Brown at SummerSlam. If we were ranking matches based on their build, then Bad News Brown versus Roddy Piper from WrestleMania 6 definitely would have been on this list. That was the one with the body paint. Don't really need to explain why it isn't looked back upon fondly. The actual in-ring stuff between the two wasn't half bad, but Brown did find his way onto this list thanks to the time he took on Jake the Snake Roberts at SummerSlam. Instead of a regular referee, this bout was overseen by the Big Boss Man. Sadly, they didn't give him a black and white version of his signature outfit. All he got was a funny hat. The two men never really got going here, as Brown looked like he was struggling mightily throughout. They also weren't given much time to play with, as Brown smacked Roberts in the stomach with a chair, resulting in a DQ finish after less than 5 minutes. Once again, this feels like a match that should have been on Raw had it existed at the time. Hey, at least Boss Man's hat was cool, eh? Number 4, Jim Duggan versus Big Boss Man at Royal Rumble. For God's sake, Jim, will you please stop clotheslining people? For Duggan's final appearance on this list, thank God, we go back to the beginning of the year and the 1990 Royal Rumble event. Big Boss Man was being primed for a Big Boss face turn in the next few weeks, so the company would need him to put on a good final few performances as a heel. They thought Hacksaw could make this happen. They thought wrong. The two wrestled a very stilted, very bland match that followed a mind-numbingly dull formula. The babyface has some fire, the heel shuts it down with rest holds, maybe the heel manager gets involved, which leads to, you guessed it, more rest holds. The match ended in DQ after Boss Man struck Duggan with his nightstick. No, that's not a euphemism, mind out of the gutter. Pay-per-view matches ending this way wasn't uncommon at the time, but this one felt especially pointless as the bout in question had been so uneventful. Number 3, Big Boss Man versus Akeem at WrestleMania 6. From 1988 to 1990, Big Boss Man and Akeem the African Dream were a menacing heel tag team. After challenging for the tag titles and playing a huge part in the Mega Powers Explode storyline in the lead up to WrestleMania 5, the duo split when Boss Man turned good in early 1990. This led to a match at WrestleMania 6 that was huge in every single way. I mean, seriously, look at the size of these lads. Even though two large gentlemen is seemingly Vince McMahon's personal idea of heaven, not every wrestling fan necessarily feels the same way. The pair just did not mix well together, with the majority of Akeem's attacks looking like he was humping his former partner in the corner. Bossman then took over and threw Akeem back and forth between two turnbuckles like he was glitching out in a 2K game. Bossman got the win with a Bossman slam, putting the marquee match to bed after less than 2 minutes of insultingly poor action. Number 2, Brutus Beefcake versus The Genius at Royal Rumble. We've already established that WWE were not afraid to end pay-per-view matches via DQ back in the early 90s. Having a 3 or 4 minute match end with no definitive winner is one thing, but one that goes 11 minutes? Come on, that's just not on. Brutus the Barber Beefcake took on Genius the Genius at the 1990 Royal Rumble. On paper, this doesn't exactly scream excitement, but wrestling matches shouldn't be judged on paper. They should be judged on terrible wrestling instead. For over 10 minutes of our precious lives, the two men mucked about outside the ring and very occasionally did something that resembled competent wrestling. This battle had zero stakes to it, zero enthusiasm from the crowd, and zero reason to be on this card. So why in God's name did the company give it so much time? What did we do to deserve this? The match ended when Mr. Perfect ran in and attacked Beefcake, which led to both men getting disqualified. Why? What did Beefer do? What did Beefer do? Number 1, Randy Savage versus Dusty Rhodes at SummerSlam. At SummerSlam 1990, two absolute legends of the sport squared off in a pay-per-view singles match for the first time ever. Dusty Rhodes, the face of the NWA and Southern Wrestling for many years, had joined the World Wrestling Federation in the summer of 1989. He fought Randy Savage in a mixed tag match at WrestleMania, but now the time had come for these two icons to go one-on-one. So, what happens? Well, Randy jumped Dusty from behind, dominated the match, and then hit his opponent with a loaded purse for the win in just over 2 minutes. How dare WWE offer up something as exciting as Rhodes versus Savage and then give us this nonsense? How dare they never put them in another pay-per-view match ever again? How dare they book them to have a better match on Primetime Wrestling for free? Oh, Dusty's first run in WWE was a disaster for many reasons, all of which are present in his utterly disgraceful match with the Macho Man at SummerSlam 1990. Cody can add this to the list of things he needs to avenge his dad for.